Welcome back to the Price Action Labs YouTube channel. So I've had a lot of questions about the ATAS platform. What do I use to trade and how do I read order flow? So the reason order flow is so important is because I often ask my students, I often ask everyone in the wider community, there's two buttons you have access to as a trader. What are those buttons? It's either buy or sell. So if you know you need to click buy or sell, my next question would be, what are you doing to read who's in control between the buyers and the sellers? That's such an important question, right? So here we have NQ on this is now the 15-minute time frame, my favorite time frame to trade. Here we have the market opening giving us a rally higher and a rally lower. So this video is going to be breaking down how I use the ATAS platform to my advantage. So the first thing to understand with the ATAS platform is there's no point using the ATAS platform if you don't know where you are trading from and you don't know the power of three, right? So these are two very important concepts. Let's start off with understanding key levels. A key level for me, very simply put, is a 15-minute fair value gap, right? So this is the fair value gap. I'm going to quickly go over this concept as well, right? I always mark out the candle before the fair value gap. The reason I do that is because the fair value gap is different from the POI, right? So this over here is the fair value gap, right? This is the POI. It's the candle before the fair value gap, right? So it's very important that to understand that. So now when I use the ATAS platform, I do the exact same thing. So ATAS is my favorite platform because you can execute directly from them. So this is the ATAS platform. So on the 15-minute time frame here on NQ, I mark out the same key level on NQ, right? So on NQ, we can see prices melted and we've essentially come off this fair value gap over here. So this is the ATAS platform, and this is the exact same fair value gap, right? So as you can see, price broke, retested, and headed lower. And we're going to be focusing and studying how you can catch these moves on something like the NASDAQ. So the first thing and the most important thing to understand is this is a key level because it's a 15-minute fair value gap. Now from here, we're going to be playing price on and we're going to be understanding what is going on at this region, right? This region is very, very important to understand, right? So we can see price has come into this area and price has failed to really hold this area because if it held, we would have had higher prices. Why has price failed to hold high and how do you know this is not a fair value gap to be buying from? Well, the question is your power of three indicator, your fair value gaps. None of these things are really going to teach you or show you how to trade properly, right? How to trade ICT concepts properly so you know whether to click buy or sell because there's only two buttons you have access to as a trader. So what do I do? So when I go to the ATAS platform, right, and I do most of my analysis in the ATAS platform, right? This is live in the markets. The first thing to understand right off the bat, right, if we go down to a 5-minute time frame, you want to understand what was going on up here. This is the high of day. Now, when we go to high of day, what's important to understand, we want to look at some of the candles near the high of day. So in this case, we see this green candle, which I want traders to pay attention to. The reason why is because we have that blue rectangle just over here. This represents a very, very large amount of aggressive buyers entering the market on NQ. This is around 1900, 100, right? Sorry, 19,100. If we look here, we have 219, sorry, 219 for 213 for 219, right? So we can see more aggressive buyers and sellers, right? This is the most important thing with the ATAS platform. You are using the ATAS platform to determine where buyers and sellers are not being rewarded. So in this case, we saw a heavy amount of aggressive buying over here, and we also see a heavy amount of aggressive buying over here, right? I can see the aggressive buyers without actually reading the candles itself, right? I can just read the colors because the colors give you something called the delta. And the delta is the difference between the aggressive buyers and the aggressive sellers. So if you have a positive delta, it means there's a lot more aggressive buyers and sellers, right? Quick point, there's not any such thing as more buyers and sellers. There's only more aggressive buyers than aggressive sellers, right? So let's just dive into this candle and see what was going on. There's two things I want traders to understand, right? First of all, we see over here 0 on the left-hand side and we see 403 on the right-hand side. So already as a trader, I'm saying that the ask volume, which is the right-hand number, the volume of the ask is significantly higher than the volume of the bid, which means that there's a lot of aggressive buyers coming into the market at this area in NQ. This is around 19,078, so around the 19,100 area. So we see a ton of aggressive buyers entering the market, right? Another thing I want to show to traders so you can understand volume is volume doesn't come from an indicator on TradingView, right? Volume comes from understanding the bid and the ask because volume by definition is the bid plus the ask. So what are you doing to read the buyers and the sellers, or the bid and the ask. So the question over here, what I want traders to understand is the volume high or low, right? So if we just go back to the candlestick chart, this corresponds to this area over here, right? This is all this area. In particular, this green candle over here, right? This green candle is what I want traders to pay attention to, right? So this green candle was super interesting. We had low volume, right? Tiny volume, and we're going to go over that on the ATAS platform. We also had 0.4403. What this means is that there's significant buying volume or there's significant ask volume. So many market participants are going in hard, going in at market prices, hitting the ask and expecting higher prices because ask hitters want higher prices. These are aggressive buyers hitting the market live, right? To be more accurate, 0 for 403. There's 403 aggressive market participants hitting the ask, looking to drive price higher. But what happens, right? What was the result of that buying activity? Well, as you can see, price aggressively melted lower into our key level. So if we just go back to the ATAS platform, right? The ATAS platform tells us that we had significant volume dry up over here and we had a significant buyers over here, right? Those buyers, of course, failed, right? Because those buyers were met with lower prices. So we know straight away buyers have failed in this region, right? Now we've come into our key level. So the key level is very important to understand, right? The key level, we see a mixture of buyers and sellers, right? We see a significant number of buyers at the bottom. In fact, we see an equal number of buyers and sellers. So we can't read price at the moment as it breaks through the level. But what's interesting is when we come back into the level and then retest lower. So let's go back to trading view, right? So what I typically look for on the trading view platform is something like this, right? So we have come into the level and we've failed to hold it, right? So price has failed to hold the level over here. Now we've broken below the zone with the body, right? So we're seeing bearish intent. Bearish intent is very important, right? And then for me, we want to see price retesting the level. When price retests the level over here, right, what do I look for as a trader? We want to see price retesting the level, hopefully coming into some kind of a fair value gap, right, before heading lower. But how do you know whether to take price lower or take price higher? Well, it comes to reading the ATAS platform. You need to understand what is going on here between the buyers and the sellers. So let's just dive in and see what was going on. This is the last candle before the down move. Notice how it's a red candle, but we have significant buying volume inside of the red candle. So here's where ATAS becomes very interesting. We're reading the blue numbers over here. We're seeing a lot of blue, a lot of blue, a lot of blue over here. We're also seeing a tiny amount of volume. So when you see a small volume and aggressive buyers, blue delta, trying to drive price higher, but the market fails to actually go higher, this is what tells us sellers are in control, and this is the most powerful thing about the ATAS platform. The ATAS platform tells you who is in control between buyers and sellers. So when we go back to a regular candlestick chart, what we need to understand is a few things, right? We see a lot of buying activity over here. But instead, what happens is the market breaks below the zone, right? We see a nice break below the zone, and this gives us our confirmation to take potential shorts, right? So you could have taken a short position from here, stop loss above this wick, and you want to be targeting at least a 1 to 2 or 1 to 2.5 risk to reward. So if we go back to live data on the ATAS platform, we can see this trade pretty much melting, giving us a 1 to 1 or 1 to 2 risk to reward scalp off this key level over here. So I just want to end the video by going over my ATAS platform settings. So this is the ATAS platform, right? If we go to cluster settings, very important to understand, I use the bid and the ask. That is the content. That is the data I'm looking at. The bid is the left-hand number on the candles. So if I just bring this over here, let's kind of dive into this a little bit. So again, the bid is very important and the ask is very important, right? So these are the two numbers I'm looking at. If we just kind of zoom in over here, if we go back to settings, cluster settings, the bid is the left-hand number. This represents aggressive selling. The right is the right-hand number. This represents the ask, aggressive buying, right? So the delta, in this case, this is a volume profile. If we go to the delta shows you the difference between the ask and the bid, right? So a positive delta means that there's more aggressive buyers. The ask is higher. If the delta is negative, we see red, which means that there's more aggressive sellers than there are aggressive buyers, right? This is the backbone to the market. This is the backbone to ICT, supply and demand, SMC, support and resistance, patterns. Everything comes down to reading who is in control between both the buyers and the sellers, right? So this is the most important thing I wanted to get out of just get out the way because I get a lot of questions on the ATAS platform. So if you're interested in learning about the ATAS platform, I do have a few spots in the mentorship. I do have a free course. I just set up one-to-one sessions. So if anyone is interested, just drop a comment somewhere below in this video, and I'll be more than happy to go over it with you.